So a lot of my why is a very feminist why of transforming the system that is extremely hostile to women and to minorities, and to change it into something that is better. Hi everyone, it's Lacey here. You already know me from my yoga videos. If you have not seen those, please check them out. What we're doing today is something completely different. So I wanted to set up this space to have kind of a podcast of sorts, which is kind of exciting because I've never done that before. I was interviewed on a podcast once, but I have never had my own. So we're going to be diving into all the fun topics that I work with and that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Yoga, birth, babies, raising kind humans, all those things we're going to be talking about here, as well as some stories that I have to share from my life and some of just the day-to-day reality of what my life is. Because I post these little yoga videos and they're cute, they're goofy. It's a fun space that we have to do yoga and to practice mindfulness and just to be silly with my kids. And that is so much fun and I enjoy it so much, and so do they. But I feel like I love to talk to adults also. So what this space is going to be is a place to talk at a little bit of a deeper level and to share the many thoughts that I have, and to do something that's beyond just a silly elephant dance or wheels on the bus yoga sequence, caterpillars and butterflies and all of that. It's a space to get real. It's a space to be the personality that I have inside that is not just the yoga teacher, although there is a lot of overlap between the two. So without further ado, the topic that I'm going to dive into today is one that is near and dear to my heart, and it is my why behind what I do. This is a big topic, and I feel like we need more than one episode just to get into the full story of who I am and how I arrived here. But let's just begin. Let's just start somewhere. We have a lot of catching up to do, huh? I want to start at a place that really changed the entire course of my life, that did a full switch from academia to suddenly being full-time teaching yoga. And I will just start there, and we'll get into the next few years and the past few years and any other relevant information in future episodes. So just watch out for some of those, because there are just too many stories to share that I can't fit into a full 15, 30, however long this podcast ends up being. So I want to take us back to 2017. That's when I graduated with my master's. I went to Harvard School of Public Health. I studied global health there. I graduated and I had no idea what I was doing with my life after that. Before that point, I had always thought that I wanted to do something higher than just a master's degree. That was kind of the plan going into the program, that I wanted to do a PhD and I wanted to set myself up for that coming out of the program. Whether that was my own dream or something that was kind of pressured onto me, because my dad works in academia. He's been a professor and I've kind of seen that my whole life. So how much of that was my dream versus a dream that was pushed onto me, that is an entirely different conversation. And I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit of that, because that has also shaped my life course as well. But my goal going into the master's degree was to come out ready for a PhD program and to have a future as a professor, teaching, doing research, writing, all those things. So when I finished my master's degree, I had applied to several US-based PhD programs and I just got rejected from everywhere. I must not have been ready or focused enough, who knows. But I didn't know what I was going to do, so I booked myself a plane ticket to Myanmar. What else would you do at that point, right? And I did a yoga internship there. I should say in parallel during my master's degree, I was doing my 200-hour yoga teacher training program, so I was fully equipped with that. And Myanmar was never somewhere I thought of going to before, but I kind of went where opportunity was. I knew someone who owned a yoga studio there, and she invited me to be an intern for the summer. So I got to be a baker, intern, and yoga teacher, dive into a lot of teaching experience all at once. At the end of the summer, I still did not know what I was doing or where I was going with my life, but I had my ticket booked back for Boston. That's where my boyfriend was, so I was going to kind of regroup, decide what I wanted to do with my life. But right before I went back home to Boston, I got an email about a PhD program that was based just outside of Vienna, Austria. And it was in migration studies, so it was very similar to what I studied in global health because my master's research was focused on women's empowerment and migration, specifically looking at Roma migrants in south of France, in Marseille, France. So it was something that was pretty interesting to me. Was it the actual interest at the center of my heart? Maybe not. So maybe it wasn't a perfect fit even to begin with, but it was Europe. And I wanted to be out of the country. I had studied global health and I was ready to be far away from home. I was ready to be in the fields, whether that was Africa or Asia, but preferably Europe because that was where my heart was. So I applied for this program. Well, the day that I got back from Myanmar, so I was very jet lagged. I had been on a very long flight overnight, had not slept much. I was called into a meeting with the two professors who interviewed me for this program, and they both held some part-time positions at Harvard, so they had a space there where we met. They told me very enthusiastically, "You got into the program, pack your bags, you're going to Vienna." So that was probably a very big red flag that I ignored because usually when you get into a PhD program or any kind of academic program, you're given like a letter of acceptance, through email or through some other means. Being told in person, wow, that's a lot of pressure. All of a sudden, it wasn't a choice. It felt like it was, you are going. We will see you there in a month. Pack your bag. Are you excited? They at least asked me that, are you excited? And of course, me not knowing how to share my voice fully and not being fully in my power, being this meek 25-year-old that I was at the time, I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. You want me to move to Europe and do this PhD? Okay, sure. Yeah, let me tell my boyfriend. Well, you can imagine how well that conversation went down with him. I had just told him, oh, I'm gonna move in with you for a little bit, and then I get home and I'm like, oh, actually, I'm moving to Austria in a month. So that's what happened. So I got to Austria and the PhD program that I was in was, I don't wanna say a joke. It wasn't a joke. That would be mean. That would be mean to say it was a joke. It was not. It was a real PhD program. It was. But I was really left hanging for an entire semester, not really knowing the direction of where my project was going. Besides kind of an initial meeting with my two advisors where we decided that I was going to be studying migration, food systems, women's empowerment. So 3 very far away things that I was going to combine into one. And I was really excited about it. Those are some really cool topics. Yeah, I was thinking I was gonna go to Calais and do some food literacy workshops with migrant moms out there. And I was going to go back to south of France, go to the bidonville and be with the Roma women and work in some of their food carts, who knew? Go back to the US even, interview migrant farm workers who were moms, and all these things. I had a great vision for what I wanted to do with those topics. Unfortunately, it did not really align with what my advisors wanted me to do, but I was kind of left hanging, so I was just left out in this village in Austria, just kind of dreaming about what direction this PhD program would take. So what happened next was something I was very unprepared for. I feel my whole life I had been pretty, what's a good word to describe it? Meek, definitely soft-spoken. I very much always wanted to follow the rules, especially in academic settings. I always have respected my teachers. The next few months that played out, a lot of it was very harsh cultural differences that I was not aware of at all, to say the least. I felt like I was Maria in Sound of Music for a lot of the time that I was out there. I was in this village that was in the middle of wine country, and it felt like it was kind of a very small town feel, although we were pretty close to Vienna, which was a little bit different. But being in this village, everyone spoke German. I did not speak a word of German, so there were so many miscommunications. And then with me, I took all of these habits from American academic culture. Like, in the US, it's not a big deal if you show up a minute or two late to meetings, but they are very punctual in Austria. And so if I was 5 minutes late, which I was a couple of times, I would have the entire room just giving me the stink eye. I would raise my hand in meetings also to share. Sometimes, occasionally, I wasn't that outspoken, but that's kind of expected in US culture. And if I had anything that remotely sounded like criticism to offer, I would get stared at. And it was very intimidating, and I would be like, I am sorry I spoke. There was a lot of that. At Harvard, where I was before, it was very commonplace for people to have their laptops out during classes, during presentations. I did that as well. And I did not know until after all of this rupture that was seen as incredibly disrespectful for me to have my laptop out during classes and during presentations. So there was that also. It was also just an incredibly hostile environment to women and to minorities. There was workplace sexual harassment that happened on a daily basis when I was there. I am not kidding you. I will not get into the details on this episode, but that definitely happened to every single woman who was in the office. It was just not a good environment to be in general. And to top it all off, when I got there, one of the first things that I found out was that my advisors were in a relationship, which is fine. Advisors can be in a relationship. I'm not saying that, but they had very extremely different research interests that I was like, that's interesting. I don't really see how they overlap. But what it felt like when I got there was that I was kind of their experimental love child project that they were taking on together. So it just kind of felt like I had walked into a modern day version of Sound of Music or some very bad Austrian movie, An American in Paris or American in the suburbs of Vienna. I don't know. It was a weird situation. That's kind of the surface level issue of what happened. But the deeper level of what took place out there was that my program, since it was migration focused, took a very swift turn, I felt, after the Austrian elections happened. My program was funded by the government out there, and I was reminded of that fact quite often, that we had to make these government officials happy by doing my research. And after the elections took place, there had been elected a very anti-migration government, and I felt what happened after that was that my project was, frankly, designed to create propaganda that was very anti-migration and xenophobic and quite racist, to be honest. It quickly shifted from being about something that was women's empowerment to having that topic just shut down completely, being told, that is not important. Why should we study women's empowerment? I, at the time, did not have the feminist vocabulary to answer that other than it's something that is important to me. What also happened at that time was that it went from something where I thought the plan was to do something similar to my master's degree, interviewing migrants, getting their perspective, being in the field, more ethnographic style research, to, oh no, migrants are dangerous to interview. You're just a white girl. you can't be around migrants. Migrants are not safe, which I felt was also incredibly racist, and became something where I was only allowed to interview politicians and only get their perspective on things rather than hearing from migrants themselves, which just didn't sit well with me. So when I spoke up about some of these things that made me a little bit uncomfortable, that felt like propaganda, although I didn't use that harsh of language when I was out there, immediately I was kicked out of the program. It was very abrupt. There was no way for me to argue it. I was called into a meeting. I brought a resignation letter with me because I could see this train wreck coming. So it was kind of one of those situations where it's like, you can't fire me because I quit. I at least got that much in during the meeting. But I was in this room, I was surrounded by my two advisors. My second advisor was the only woman in the room. The rest were men, dressed very professional, wearing suits. I was probably honestly wearing the same dress. I was like a college student at the time. I wasn't getting paid enough to be wearing something fancy like a suit. But anyways, I was the youngest in the room by far. Well, the youngest in the entire department by far, but the youngest in the room, one of the only women in the room, and I was talked at and not given the opportunity to speak. I was talked over. Every time I had something that I wanted to say, it was shut down. And it was just this stream of authoritative speech. You are disrespectful. You are the worst student we have ever had. Well, they only had one student, and that was me. So, it ended up just me being talked at, told the worst things that I could possibly hear from all of my years of being a student at that point. I ended up in tears because I'm just like, you're not letting me speak. I feel like I have no voice here. And so I was just completely shut down, crying. Yeah, I was told that if I wanted to fight this, I was going to have to take it up with the Austrian government. I didn't even speak German, so not really an option for me. Just a student with no money at that point. So I was going to be on my way home. The last thing that was said at that meeting from my advisor, the woman was silent the entire time, was just this very sarcastic, good luck as a yoga teacher, and then walked out of the room, shut the door. I was left alone. It was awful. It was such a traumatic experience. There was nothing in my entire academic career to that point that even compares to the train wreck that this PhD was. And as I said, a lot of that was cultural. I didn't know how to be a student in an Austrian program. I only knew the American experience before then, but a lot of it was straight up racism, sexism. Not racist against me because I'm just a white girl, and I was reminded of that when I was there, but racist ideas against migrants, hostile to minorities, hostile to women. So it was an experience. So right away from then, my life took a completely different direction. It was a full shift from being a student immersed in academia. That was the only thing I had done. I had not taken a gap year at that point. I had not taken a break. So from being a PhD student to suddenly being a yoga teacher. My why, let's dive deep into that topic now, which the whole thing I've been saying up to this point is leading up to that why. But my why behind what I do on a daily basis is it is for my kids. They are at the center of everything I do. When they were born, the love, the incredible bond, the incredible attachment that I have felt for them as a mom has been like nothing else. And it has led to another shift in my values and what is important to me. So my kids are at the center of it all, especially especially because my first is a girl. And coming into this world and having experienced such sexism in academia where I worked, and I'm sure other sectors there is just as much, if not more, overt sexism and overt just meanness towards women, towards girls. So a big why behind what I do is to prepare her to be able to navigate some of that. My baby boy, I'm sure, will face his own issues, and masculinity in a very patriarchal world, ooh, that's another why behind what I do as well. To lead him to a more gentle form of masculinity than what we see perpetuated day to day in the media and just in daily life. So a lot of my why is a very feminist why of transforming the system, dismantling the system that is patriarchal, that is capitalist, that is extremely hostile to women and to minorities, and to change it into something that is better. So I work through being a mom, through being a yoga teacher, through being a birth worker, because that is what I have access to at the moment. I still do global health work on the side, so I wear a lot of different hats. But the reason that I wanted to set up this channel where I'm speaking so candidly about those things is that I want to bring these issues to light. So it's a platform to find my voice and to invite others to the conversation as well. But it's just going to be a space where we dive into some of these topics. So I will be talking about all things related to yoga, to birth work, to what I am doing still here in global health, and honestly to a lot of feminist thoughts about raising children. So this is a platform for that. So if you have suggestions for topics that you'd like me to speak about, please comment below. If you have questions, let me know, because I just dropped a lot of bombs in this episode. So I am sure there will be big thoughts and feelings. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. If you're still with me at this point, I am so honored that you're here on this journey and that you are with me still. Thank you, and I will see you next time.